This video is going to go along with task sheet 867. This one is talking about doing like actuator controls, special functions, features in the scan tool. If you remember, we kind of touched on this in the PowerPoint. We'll call it bidirectional control or a bidirectional scan tool where we can actually command the vehicle to do some certain things. I'm not really going to be able to come up with necessarily a problem for this. I'm just going to kind of run through on the scanner and show you a couple of different functions that we can do and why we might do a couple of those things. The task sheet's asking for 2. I'll kind of show you what's on the menu, and I'll go in and actually mess around with a couple of them, and then we'll go from there. So I got the truck running. A lot of these tests are going to require the vehicle to be running. If not running, it'll at least have to be on. But this is our main menu. Again, we're going to have to go into the scanner function. Our OBD direct section isn't really going to have this functionality. So this is our main menu. We're going to go into engine. Let's see, we've already got our cable hooked up. So we're going to look for functional tests. Now we do have a few different things we can do right in this menu. We can relearn a crankshaft position sensor if we replace the sensor, the crankshaft, or the engine itself. It kind of fine-tunes the sensor reading. It kind of lets the PCM know like the specific value off that crankshaft. So if you change anything, you may have like a 1/10 of a degree difference in between the two. So it kind of learns that. We have an evap service bay test if you want to command this thing to check for a leak. That usually takes a while. Injector balance, I kind of showed you guys that already. But what we're looking for is output controls. So we have a pretty big list here that we can choose from. We've got more injector disabling that we can do. Turn our mill on and off, our malfunction indicator lamp. And I'm real sorry about the glare, guys. There's not much I can do about it. I hit the wrong button. A couple I'm going to show you today. So we got fuel pump relay. We can turn that on and off, make sure it's running. We're going to do IAC control, and then I'll do evap purge seal. But we'll go to IAC control. Alright, so usually when we go into special functions, it's going to give us, that's better. It's going to give us some data along with whatever we're doing. So at the top you can see our IAC control. That's our RPMs basically. So what we need to do is hit start. Before we do this, a newer car that has throttle by wire, it's going to be a little bit different. This may just say throttle control or engine speed control, something like that, and all it's going to do is crack open the throttle plate and get us whatever RPM we need. This one has since it has a manual throttle, we're going to use this idle air control valve. It's going to kind of open a little bypass, lets a little bit more air into the intake, and we can raise our RPMs that way. So that's what we're going to do, and hit start. And we can command this to specific RPMs. Takes a minute. But it'll start to come up. So you see we can kind of come back up, or we can go up, we can hit return. Exit, and it'll release control. So the reason that is useful, if we have, sometimes we need to look at sensor data at specific RPMs. We'll tell you to rev it up to 1500 or 2000 RPMs or something, and that can be hard to do with just your foot on the gas to get something accurate. So a lot of times when I run into something like that, I would go in and command my RPMs to a specific amount and then watch my data, so I didn't really have to mess with it. So evap purge seal is another one that I use frequently in some drivability stuff. Actually, let's go back one. So we have purge seal and we have the purge solenoid. So the purge solenoid is just gonna operate the purge solenoid. On this truck, it's located under this cover. If you remember, the purge solenoid is what allows the engine to pull our evap gases into the engine to be burned. And then on the back we have a vent valve also if we ever need to vent any of that. So when we do purge seal, that kind of that's going to make sure that we close the vent, and then it'll give us some control over our purge also. So if you just wanted the purge valve to turn on and off, you could go straight into that, but we're going to do purge seal. We're going to start. So you can see we're not venting. Our fuel tank pressure sensor is reading -55, so that's a very, very slight vacuum. See, I don't have a whole lot of gas left in this thing. And then there's our canister purge. So we're not purging and we're not venting, so this is a sealed system right now. But what we can do is give us a little bit of purge. And look at our fuel tank pressure, it's pulling a vacuum on it. So we let a little bit of our intake vacuum draw some of these fumes out of the tank, and right now, since we're sitting at a negative, there's a vacuum in my fuel tank, or low pressure. So what this can tell us, this is a real quick test that I used to do purge seal, put a little vacuum on there and watch that fuel tank pressure. If you have a leak, that'll return to zero pretty quickly. It's holding for the most part, so we know the system's probably okay. And it will degrade a little bit as you go, just naturally. But a lot of times in the GM world, we had problems with these purge valves, and they wouldn't seal upright, so they would always be pulling a little bit of a vacuum on the system. So what we do is go in and do a system seal, and it should just kind of read nothing. But if all of a sudden, if you do a system seal and you're still counting negative, it means your purge valve is leaking. It's drawing those gases into the engine. So this is just another little quick test that we can do to kind of see how this system's functioning. So that's really all I have for this. There's a couple other little things that we can do in these menus, but a lot of this on these older vehicles is kind of on-off kind of things. But that's all we got for this one. I know it's kind of short, but fill the sheet out the best you can, and then I think that will wrap us up for chapter 64. Thanks, guys.